I couldn't wait. Hey, it's Romania Black. I'm sorry. I watched episode 4 yesterday, and I was like, am I really going to wait until watching episode 5, especially after that setup? Nope, can't do it. So, oh man, I'm finally getting over my cold, which I'm really glad about. Last episode I sounded pretty gruff. I do have some tea here with me, but I do sound a lot better this episode. And so I couldn't wait. I was like, no, last episode we had that great moment with Salazar, figuring out his character, his son Tom, why he's helping Cassano, his whole motivations, figuring all of that out, and then seeing how it ties into Ed and his own father, who was a lawyer who became, the center of a human trafficking ring. And it's like, okay, wow, we've got some mature subject matter now injected into Ed's story. And now we go back to the present where Ed and Laurent are still conning Cassano into creating this factory so he can make Sakura magic. Ed's not been, as far as we know, watching the videos where the one guy has been supposedly showing him how to make drugs. He doesn't want to get involved in that. Abby doesn't really want involved in drugs. But Abby, there's lots of mystery set up in the last episode that we went over. And I was like, I need to know. I don't want to be spoiled. I need to know, how does this go down, right? How is this going to go down? Because now Ed's working with Paula Dickens, with the FBI. They're working with Anderson, who was working with Cassano. Laurent is working with Cassano, but he's trying to con Cassano. So is Laurent and Paula related? Are they connected? How does this all work? Abby doesn't seem to like Paula. You know what? I don't know. And that's why I couldn't wait. Way too hot. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and watch the episode and then just see what all ends up happening. So now Ed is working with the FBI. Ed is like being a triple agent. He's like fooling Cassano for Laurent, but also fooling Laurent for Paula. Is he going to fool Paula to try to get back to Laurent? I don't know. I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much going on. And I have so many questions and I wanted to know what was going to happen. So last episode was, as you can see, my voice is not entirely back. Last episode was really, really good, and I really enjoyed it, and now I need to know things. So we'll see what happens, right? But I couldn't wait, so I'm sorry. I am excited to hear everybody's comments on episodes 4 and this episode as well, but we'll cross that hurdle when we get to it, right? I'm so excited. But we are going to start episode 5 of The Great Pretender and see what all happens. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Oh my gosh. That was so good. That was so good. Oh, I like if a thriller crime thing like that has a twist. It was all a con. It was all a huge, huge con. Getting Paula to come in was a major con. Wow. Go figure. So honestly, I was debating whether to bring Whiteboard Coon out or not, but basically I feel like everything unravels at such a fast pace. So basically Laurent was like, yeah, us upping this up to $10 million, we're getting in a little over our head. So I feel like Laurent is very interested in Edamura, but realizes Edamura is like the most genuine, honest con artist imaginable. And basically Edamura is just like, he wears his heart on his sleeve and he has a heart of gold, even though he's a con artist. And Laurent's like, this kid's going to get us killed. I need to nip this in the bud and we need to take control back of the situation. So yeah, basically backing up, she came on the scene after Edamura upped the ante to 10 million. So Laurent's like, okay, now we're not playing with just like decent money of 5 million. Now we've upped it to 10. So we've gotten a little bit more serious. And Edamura, in his infinite wisdom, has offered to give the recipe to Cassano, who's going to take advantage of that. So Laurent's like, we need to get ahead of the con, right? So he calls in Cynthia. I only think of like the Pokemon Elite Four Cynthia, but he calls in Cynthia, who's a major con artist, has her own island, right? And her own band of misfit con artists. She's like Peter Pan up in this. And he's like, I need to borrow a favor. We can get a lot of money if you can help me get this kid to act along with us. So that's the thing, is that Edamura, he could become a really good con artist. He could be really, really good. He just is so honest. And Lauren seems like he's willing to wait 4 years. He's like, I can wait. I can wait on you. Sure, I can do that. But man, we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, Laurent, he set this whole thing up. He knew that Ed was in over his head. And he's like, I'll get Paula to come on this. We'll find this kid. He knew everything about him, so he was able to tell Paula everything about him to get her to like confront him. Anderson and the cops had no clue. She basically posed as the real Paula Dickens. Nobody knew the wiser because honestly, who's going to memorize that, right? They've only heard the legends. They don't know what she actually looked like. And she went in there, gave him the tech, and said, and she has the money to do so, and said, okay, here's the recording devices, here's everything that you're going to work with us to help us catch Laurent and Abby. I wondered last episode if Laurent and Cynthia were working together. They were, in fact, except she was Cynthia, not Paula Dickens. And Abby's whole thing about not liking her is tied in with Cynthia. So that's so curious. That Abby probably wasn't lying. She just wasn't referring to Paula Dickens. She just said that woman. Oh my God. But, so yeah, they had the whole factory set up. They're like, we're going to bust him when they make the deal. And he's like, you're going to make the drugs and then we're going to take the 10 million. Oh my God. And then I love that it all makes sense. Paula encouraging him on now, Cynthia encouraging him to make the drug because that's how they're going to catch him. It all makes sense, right? And they knew that the drug wasn't actually going to get distributed. They were going to use it in the catch. So there's all of that, right? And then God, all of it adds up so wonderfully. The fact that Laurent was like outside with him, outside talking to him, being like, hey, it's okay. We didn't really mean to get this far in. It's kind of your fault, kid, but we did drag you into this, so I guess you're not totally to blame. But now we have to resort to this because we don't have any other options. You kind of backed us into a corner. But he was like, Paula, aka Cynthia, was listening in the entire time. And Laurent probably knew that she was. So that's fun. That's interesting. But yeah, so he gets to making the drug and following the video. And it almost looks like Abby and Laurent are just, like, Laurent is just infatuated. He's just sitting there watching him. Like you're doing exactly what you're supposed to. Like, I feel like Laurent is, like, head over heels crushing on Edamura in this episode. Abby's just like, you're an idiot and you're running along with this. But I feel like Laurent is just like having the time of his life watching Ed like freak out and be like, like, yeah, you're doing exactly what we told you to do. And you're just doing the best you can. And then we get that cut back to Salazar where he asked if Salazar could be let go. And Cynthia, posing as Paula, is like, no, he's an accomplice. He's probably going to go to jail for life. And Abigail and Laurent are probably going to get 20 years. But you don't have a choice now because you'll go to jail if you don't help us. So, no, nobody's spared. And the funny thing is, Salazar gets spared at the end. I love it. I love it. He ends up being the one to turn Cassano in. It's great. But Ed just ends up, he thinks of Tom and is like, I don't want him to be without his dad. And so he ends up going through with it because he doesn't have a choice, right? And they pulled the wool over Cassano's eyes until the very end. And Salazar not really being part of the con, but being the one that gets out of it. I love that. I love that so much. And then, so we got these guys, we have Anderson and them, who get the coffee from these two guys that end up looking like they're with the FBI thing, but maybe they were stationed by Cynthia to do all this, right? Maybe. I want to go back to that image and look and see who it was. It looked like it was Anderson gathering up the coffee, right? And then, but wait, who was it? I want to see who that was again. Going back to that gas station. Yeah, the gas station, there's two people there. And they're like, oh, hey, can I help you with something? And then these guys come in and get the coffee, right? They got the coffee from the gas station to bring in. So maybe they were with Cynthia's men, right? They were part of the FBI team, but they were actually Cynthia's men that got the coffee, brought it to Laurent, and then gave it to Abby, and gave it to Ed. Oh my gosh. But this episode, like everything, all of the equipment, everything, all the stuff Cassano spent all this money on, and they just blow it all up with the drugs, which I'm happy they blew it up with the drugs. That was really good. But yeah, I like that Laurent's like, come on, you can keep doing this. And he's like, anyone would be gloomy after making that drug. I feel like Abby kind of sympathizes with Ed a little bit in this episode because Abby said she doesn't want to be involved in drugs, and knowing that Ed is not happy he's doing this, I feel like she might sympathize with him a little bit more after this. But then we're supposedly having a time skip, so what do we do with that, right? Interesting. And then Laurent's like, thanks for everything, Ed. And he's like, you're so creepy. He's like, you'll be a great con artist. You're diligent, sensitive, and you have guts. I'm like, and Abby's like, and he gets easy and he gets panics easy and gets cocky. So yeah, I feel like Laurent wants to have Ed on his team because he knows that he's got guts and he is sensitive and diligent. But this is like the biggest test, was to see if Makoto could in fact pull it off. And he does, but he had no clue in the process. Now, granted, the whole con, the entire Los Angeles connection, Ed has had no clue what was going on. He had no idea that he was in on a con to this extent, right? That the whole thing was fabricated with him as the linchpin to make it all work. And the fact that it works is because he had no clue. Now that he knows how Cynthia, Laurent, and Abby work, would he be able to pull off the con? I think he would, but it's fascinating that it works as well as it does with him having no idea what's happening, right? Oh my God. And then he goes back in, makes the candy, and she said, and to Cynthia's credit, she says, no one will die. Mm-hmm. And so the guys that came in with Anderson and them, that came in and posed, they're from the gas station, but were they part of Cynthia's crew? I want to check at the very end there and see. And even the part, like all of this was fabricated. They're all actors. Even the part of Abby sensing that they were coming and Laurent and them being like, really, Ed, you sold us out. Like that was all part of the act. Like they're genius actors in on the whole damn thing. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? And then, yeah, and they bust in with Anderson and they all come in and break and make their way with the fake guns and everything. And then Paula comes in as well and tells Ed to get over there. And they all act it so well. And Laurent even smiling, where he's like, now you've done it. Like, I feel like that should have been red flag number one, that Laurent not being nervous and being so nonchalant is a sign that, yeah, he knew that this was all playing out exactly as he planned. Oh my God. But then like Abby, the whole thing, like it all had to be orchestrated to where they did get shot, right? And he says, you're the ones who said to protect myself on my own. I feel like in this moment, Ed has kind of cemented himself that he could work with the crew because he did exactly what Abby told him. He's like, he took care of himself. He can think on the fly. He makes decisions that impact himself. I feel like he's proven that he can be a con man because he can do whatever is necessary to get out of the situation. And that's when Abby takes Salazar's gun and points it. And that's when, and of course, Laurent has to do like the big, it should have been obvious when it's like they had the bullet holes and stuff, but it was probably like stuff they'd stuffed their shirts and stuff with, the packages of blood. It's probably just blanks or air shots. It should have been obvious because he like goes after to help her and cushion her. And would Laurent have really done that in real life, being the con man he is? I don't know. I do feel bad for Ed, that Ed has to see the two of them go down. I do feel bad about that. Because then, of course, Ed is like traumatized and has to like think that they're dead. And Laurent and Abby saw him act that way the whole time. Like be super sad that they were dead. I was like, of course, Laurent's probably like, you really were that upset that I died? Like, just... And then he takes Salazar's gun, which is real, and threatens Cynthia with it. And that's when Cassano makes his move. And he's going to let Salazar out while Cassano's like trying to figure out how to like get rid of the drugs, get rid of the evidence. And I love that Ed tells him, he's like, this isn't for you, it's for your kid. I'm letting you go so you can start a new life for the betterment of your child. And it's like, and I want to make note that Salazar has her ring on his neck as a necklace, and it seems that Laurent has the blue ring from the ED on his neck as a necklace. So there's something with that. There's some mystery there, right? Very much so. And then Cassano tries to get out of the way. The place blows up. Salazar went to save Ed, and Ed chases down. It's so cinematic. It's so cinematic how Ed chases down Cassano and tackles him to the ground and tries to make him stay because he had been in on all of this. It's so cinematic how they chase after one another. Again, the animation style for this episode is wonderful. It works so well. It's so good. And then Cassano taking the traffic cone and hitting him with it. I'm not saying I have been hit with a traffic cone, but that sucker has some heft to it. A real traffic cone has some weight. So if you really hit someone over the head repeatedly with it, yeah, it'd do some damage. Doesn't seem like it would, but it would. And then I love that Salazar is the one that comes back and is just slams him. Man, just gets him. Now, at this point in the episode, when Ed is brought back to the FBI location, I'm sure during the reaction I was really quiet up until a certain point because the gears in my head were turning and I was like, wait a minute. Why are we back here? What's happening? What's going on? And there are several red flags that go off at this part in the episode that my brain was trying to catch up and process everything and be like, hold on, what's happening? The first red flag that happens is that after Salazar gets Ed, he gets patched up by the FBI man, but he's tied to the chair in a straitjacket, right? That's kind of red flag number one, because why would he be tied up? Except they didn't want him to move because they wanted the stuff with Cassano to go down. They wanted Cassano to transfer the money, so they tied Ed up so that he couldn't interfere with that transaction, even though he really didn't have a reason to be tied up. But they tied him up because they knew he'd be a loose cannon and go berserk. That's red flag number one. Red flag number two is that the bodies of Abigail and Laurent are just on display. Because, in all honesty, the FBI at that point would have called an ambulance. The hospital would have come, picked them up, and transported them if they were really dying or dead. The FBI would not have laid their bodies out with a towel over them or a blanket over them and let them listen in on the transaction. That would not have happened. So that's red flag number two. And then we have Paula, aka Cynthia, back with Cassano as he's talking about blowing up the place. And she's like, well, and it all makes sense now that his glasses were not only to trick Ed into thinking he was talking to an FBI agent, but they were also taking video and camera footage of Cassano that they could use to blackmail him. Genius, right? She's like, and he's like, I love he looks at the evidence that clearly will indict him, and he's like, so how much money do you want? That's the very first thing he says. And Ed, of course, is like, are you kidding? She's like, I'm not just... And she does a really good job of playing the FBI agent that's not going to take the bait, right? And she's like, I don't have any copies right now. And he's like, I'll buy this for $10 million. He's like, isn't that hundreds of times your normal wage? He says, 20 million. And she says, there's no points if you bribe only me. She's like, you have to silence my entire team. And now, in hindsight, that's such a clever thing to say because it wasn't just her working alone. She had Laurent, she had Abby, she had an entire team on the island. She had the one woman that came in and tried to, seduce Ed. She had a whole team. So she's like, well, you can't just pay me. You gotta pay everybody. So she wasn't lying per se, right? And he says, how much? And she's like, let's see, 100 million. And Ed's like, are you serious? And then, of course, Cassano says, I don't have that much. She's like, well, you do in your Swiss bank account. And that's when he's like, I'll be broke. And she's like, the family too. And she says, you're a stray dog that was lucky until now. And that's when he gets her the stuff to wiretap it. And then, of course, Ed is like, hey, she's like, the U.S. is a country of freedom and capitalism. Oh my God, I love it. Should have been red flag number 4. But I love it. She's like, no, we're just doing what we got to do, right? And Ed, who has a heart of gold, is like, no, this isn't fair. And then, so here we have the thing on here, right? We have Enzio, Archad Tuckeris, 5 million. Gohoji Wada, 7 million. Tetsuya Nagatake, 12 million. Ebichiri Mayonezu, 5 million. And then Eddie Casano, 100 million. So she's been dealing with some people in the Asian countries, right? Interestingly enough. That should have been red flag number 5, is she has all these high dollar deposits. Why would she need that, right? Curious. And then she sees Casano and she's like, okay, there's no other copy. She's like, I won't lie to 100 million. He's like, that was a painfully expensive lesson, but I'll make more money. And she's like, we'll keep in touch. Mm-hmm. And then the thing about it is they bring in Salazar and Casano says, oh, put all the small charges on this guy. Which is so funny because Casano throws him under the bus and then he ends up getting all the evidence that he can use to indict Casano. It's like, it's amazing. And she's like, oh, I bet he'll look great in them, in the small charges. And then as Casano's leaving, Ed's like, I love he's like, stop effing around. He's like, how rotten are you people? He's like, I won't forgive this. He's like, if you leave unpunished, then what was the point of those two? And he doesn't finish the sentence, but it's like, what was the point of those two dying if they don't get punished? Admirable Edamura, right? Admirable things for him to say. And then Laurent is like, oh, that was so cute that you defended us. It was great. And then the moment he gets knocked out, it's like, nope, that was the con. And he wakes up like on the desert island in the Caribbean. It's like you end up in the Caribbean. It's like, where's Blanca, right? From Banana Fish? Where's he at in all this? And so then we see like her coming up beside him and she calls everybody in, right? She calls everybody in. And then Abby comes up in her bathing suit. Abby only owns one bathing suit, by the way, but it looks good on her, so we'll let it go. And then Laurent is like been surfing. And it's like, are you kidding me? And he has the ring around his neck. He says he finally woke up. And she's like, you sleep too much. I love Abby. She's just not in it. And he's like, I'm so confused. And he's like, oh, sorry, my real name is Cynthia. And this entire island is mine. And that's my villa. And inside are all my people. All of the other con men. I love that she basically like has a resort like on this private island that's just for con artists. And she's like, yeah, I run this show. And these people help me. It's great. And so, yeah, it's everybody there. And, of course, Laurent is, like, having the spring rolls, being like, this is amazing. And she's like, yeah, it's great. She's like, of course. And then we go to the live film producer Casano arrested. A drug production of money transfers. We expect a guilty verdict. And everybody's, like, cheering it. And Ed's like, wait, what? And we cut back to the moment where he got knocked out by Abby. Of course, by Abby. She's like, he's too loud. And Laurent's like, you're so violent. And so the LAPD guys are all okay. They were just unconscious. Go figure. She's like, we'll leave them. And time to clean up the set. And I love that Salazar's like, what? He was like here to hear all of this. And Laurent's like, oh, you can leave. Here's a copy of the evidence. If you negotiate with the real Paula Dickens, you should get a plea bargain. And you can live happily with Tom. I love it. I love that everything that Ed said about Salazar and his kid, that Laurent and all of them took to heart. And they basically were like, okay, you can turn him in and live happily ever after with your son. And we'll just leave with our money. So it's the weirdest, like, the weirdest, not Robin Hood scenario, but it's so bizarre that this entire island of con artists basically took down an entire giant drug wrangling mogul from Hollywood and ran off with $100 million of his cash. Like, that's amazing to me. It almost makes Ed seem like Ed would be like, oh, okay, I can be kind of okay with this because you were doing a service, I guess, in this scenario, right? So that's so good. I love that so much. Yep, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's a great time. But yeah, that's basically what ends up happening. And then the LAPD, Anderson and all of them are like rolling around like Rocky Horror style. It's like, you know, at the very end of Rocky Horror where the house flies off and they're like crawling on the planet's surface, on the planet's face is these lonely creatures called the human race. Yep. Great. And then we cut to the FBI where the real Paula Dickens, who looks a little different than Cynthia, manages to tell Cassano that he basically got played. And he knows nothing about any of these characters. He knows Laurent, but not enough about anybody to really convict them. It's amazing. I love it. I love it so much. And then we cut back to Salazar being with Tom. And it's so sweet. And thus the Cassano family collapsed. And Laurent is like so theatrical and dramatic about it. It's wonderful. And Abby's like, Hollywood might get a little cleaner. And see, that's the thing, right? For Ed, this is a moment of him being like, oh, con artists could maybe help people in a way. We're making money, of course, and taking other people's money and scamming them. But in the long run, it is kind of like a Robin Hood scenario a little bit because Abby, you know, she was against drugs and she's like, if we booked this drug kingpin, Hollywood might get a little cleaner. And Laurent's like, and we took down a family and made all this money. And then I love that. And Cynthia says, wine after a good deed tastes delicious. That she's like, we did our good Samaritan work for the day. Time to have wine. And the FBI and everyone there are all con artists. And they're like, yep, pretty much. The guns are all Hollywood props. And then our guns are too, of course. And he's like, why? Why did you need to trick me? And then Cynthia says, we had to trick you because the only way to gain the LAPD's and Anderson's trust would be to not let on that even you knew about the con. She's like, something had to be believable, and you being in the dark was the most valid scenario, so that's why. And for entertainment. And because Ed's a lot of fun to see panic, right? He's like, entertainment? It's really fun to tease you, edamame. He's like, and everything went according to plan. Other than when you went berserk. Yeah, other than him, like, you know, creating a situation. And when everyone almost died. You know, other than that. And then in comes Shion Kim. I love Shion Kim has like a leather jacket and like a motorcycle, like does moto jacket, like the snake tattoo. It's great. And Laurent is like, I was tired of waiting. Bring in that money. It's showtime, babies. And then there we go. And it says our haul from Sakura Magic was $10 million. And the fake FBI bribery plan was $100 million. To split between all of them, $110 million. Which, yeah, it's just like there's so much money there. Everybody's just swimming in it. And he's like, how scary. And I like that Cynthia and Abby are like, Laurent gets a little bit cocky in this moment. Laurent's like, my talent is frightening. And I love that he has very Urahara vibes from Bleach in that moment. And I like that both Cynthia and Abigail are like, yeah, no. They're like, it's, you know, arrogance is not a flattering look on you, Laurent. But who's covering the holes in your sloppy, irresponsible plan? I like that Cynthia's like, remember when you called me to like fix your mistakes? Like that was a thing? Remember that? Abby's like, remember how you needed me to do your planning? Yeah. And he's like, And he doesn't seem to care, right? And Abigail's like, that's true, you blonde moron. And then they give the rookie his share in the sack. And then as they're leaving, I love that they all just get on like a jet to go back home. They're like, oh, thanks, Cynthia. And the one guy here says, Cynthia, abuse me next time too. Like, what does this woman do? I'm a little bit worried. I like Cynthia a lot, but I'm like, man, what is happening? And she's like, get out of my face. And then as Ed's like listening, they're all starting to walk away, and Abigail's got her money. And Laurent's like, Abby, take us to the airport with you. Along with Shion and them and Cynthia. There's a fare. And they ask Ed if he needs a ride. And he looks at the figurine, right? And the thing about it is, the figurine, the whole story with the figurine was that he basically, it's kind of funny because the whole story with Hideyoshi was that he basically stood up and got revenge on the people that killed his partner Nobunaga and ended up taking, over the authority of the situation and into becoming this great figure. And I feel like the whole taking revenge is kind of like what Ed did. Ed was trying to like stand up and avenge Laurent and Abby's deaths, and he ends up becoming part of this great thing, right? And he says, is it possible for me too, being a con artist? And that's a really good question for Ed, because Ed's got the guts, he has the sensitivity, and he's got the know-how, but is he really cut out for it? That's a big question, right? And I like that Shion says, oh, don't be cheesy about it and say it's that you feel alive for the first time. She's like, don't be that way. Like, that's her answer. He's like, can I be a con artist based on everything that's happened? Can I really do this and become a con artist? And Shion Kim is like, yeah, don't get cheesy and say that you felt alive for the first time. Don't be like that. Cynthia says, be one if you'd like. She's like, you got your money. You can take it and go. But if you want to be a con artist, sure, do it. And Abigail says, one mistake and you're gone. That's the thing. It's funny, you have Shion that's like, oh, don't be cheesy and romantic. You have Cynthia who's like nonchalant, being like, yeah, do it. If you want to, do it. It very much seems like that's their like lifestyles. And then you have Abigail who's like, one mistake and you're out of here. Like, don't be flippant about it. Don't just say you want to be a con artist and not accept the risks, right? And then Laurent, he says, you'll work under me. I won by a landslide, right? I won the overall bet, right? And Ed smiles at that. He smiles at the idea of working with Laurent, right? But then he thinks back and he says, can you wait for a bit? And he says, how long? Probably 3 or 4 years. And he says, why that long? And he says, I want to take responsibility for my rotten life. And Laurent says, I'll be waiting. Replace Cassano, invest in a new Razzie movie or something. And Ed's like, I'll do one better. He's like, I'm not gonna become a drug lord. I'm not gonna invest in movies or anything like that. Ed's thinking is like, I screwed up back in Japan. I need to serve my time, get my record clean, and then join you. He's like, I need to finish my unfinished business and decide if this is really what I want to do. Right? He's like, I owe my mother that. I owe myself that. I need to fix my record, get everything straight, plan for 3 to 4 years, figure out what I want to do. And then if I decide I want to be a con artist, I'll come back to you, Laurent. Ooh, I like it. And then he goes back to the police station, right? We cut back to Japan, where he shows up. It's a traffic safety day, is what the banner says. He's like, I was a swindler. This is the money I stole until now. I'll return it to the victims. There should be enough money. Sorry, it's in dollars instead of yen. Oh my gosh, yeah. So he's gone back to take responsibility for the con that he did, because that's the thing, right? That's the thing. There's a difference between these two cons. The scam that was done with the people and the tea was taking their money without giving them anything in return. And here, this con was taking the money from a guy who had taken from so many others and just stopping that one man's actions from happening any further. So now Ed's going back being like, wait, let me repent everything I've been doing. And then once I have all that out of the way, we'll see what happens. So, oh my gosh, this episode was just so much fun. And I was like, just trying to soak it all in and piece it all together. And then boom, baby, there we are. There it goes, right? That felt so good. So good. But yeah, now I have the big question, like, are we going to do one of two things? Well, one of three things. We could do one of three things. We could either do one, follow Ed the next 3 to 4 years, and in the next episode, like him getting hooked back up with LaRon. 2, do a time skip where he gets hooked up with LaRon and it's 3 to 4 years later. Or 3, we follow LaRon around while we wait for Ed to show back up. I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go from here, but I'm very, very excited to find out. So, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. This was a lot of fun, but now I'm ready to see what all is going to happen in our next episode of Great Pretender. So, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I'll be back very soon with more of The Great Pretender. Bye.